The Violence Against Women Act, established almost 20 years ago, might seem like an uncontroversial but much-needed piece of legislation. And indeed, it's been routinely reauthorized with overwhelming support from both sides of the House. But not anymore. Because while the Senate has passed a bill to continue these protections, House Republicans are proposing their own version. Unfortunately, the House bill excludes protection for LGBT Americans. In other words, the very people who often need it most. Just moments ago, Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi took exception in describing what Republicans are offering.
Not so fast if you're Native American, immigrant, gay, lesbian, or whatever. Not so fast. Don't step forward. Doesn't include you. We're talking about the substance of this. This goes way back for us, and I will not allow the Republicans to trivialize it.
Congresswoman Gwen is a Democrat from Wisconsin who authored the Democratic version of the House bill. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Martin.
I know that this isn't just politics to you, but very personal. Just a short time ago at a press conference, you became quite emotional in explaining why the Republican version of this bill offends you so much. Can you tell our audience why?
Let me tell you something. The Violence Against Women Act is a bill that's supposed to protect all women from violence. And the advocates, including law enforcement, district attorneys, the Department of Justice, have determined that in order for this to protect all women, we need to give authority to tribal councils. We need to include language that will specifically protect lesbians, LGBT couples, and we need to protect and provide youth visas for those immigrants that cooperate with law enforcement. In addition to that, the current law already provides protection for victims, and this bill erodes the confidentiality of all victims, whether they're LGBT immigrants or live on native lands. It's a very, very dangerous repeal of some provisions that have been important in protecting women.
But as I said, Congresswoman, this is very personal to you because you yourself, as I understand it, have been the victim of violence.
Oh, absolutely, Martin. You know, I've known violence in my personal life from like age 5, all through my teenage years and up through being a very young woman. The story I told today to reporters was a time at which I got a ride from someone who I thought was my friend to go get some fried chicken. And he pulled in behind some vacant buildings, raped me, choked me almost to death. I went to the police. We ended up in court. And, Martin, I was on trial. I mean, they talked about the fact that I had a child out of wedlock already, the way I was dressed, the fact that I had gone voluntarily in the car with him. I was on trial. And, of course, he was found not guilty. Well, if we had had the tools to, first of all, educate prosecutors, I'd have been better off.
But I understand that some House Republicans have been less than sympathetic towards same-sex relationships. But why would they exclude minority groups, people from the LGBT community, who are often more likely to be the victims of violence? I just can't understand it.
And, you know, if this is to truly be the Violence Against Women Act, we can leave no woman behind.
Right.
I can tell you that it has been, best practices have determined that in order to include all women, we need to include LGBT couples. We need to include women on tribal lands. You know, it's a very sad case for women on tribal lands because, the majority of people who live on tribal lands are not Native people. And so it's a veritable sanctuary for those who want to commit sexual assault.
But can you explain to me why women on tribal lands are not protected?
Because the tribal councils, don't have the full authority to prosecute non-Native men. And the bill that Ms. Adams introduced even repeals those protections that were in place to create more confusion around the tribal authority, tribal council's authority to prosecute those folk. We have heard stories of folks who have been raped and beaten on tribal lands, and they have gone unprosecuted because the perpetrators were non-native people.
Right. Final question, Congresswoman. Doesn't this play into the continuing narrative that the Republicans are not a diverse party that reaches out to all Americans, but a party that instead discriminates and offers protections for some people, but not for others?
Well, I can tell you that the Republican Party is not very diverse. I think they brag about their 1 or 2 members, for example, who are African American.
Sure.
And they try to elevate their 1 or 2 members who are Latino. But for the most part, it's a party that doesn't honor the diversity in American culture. And they quibble over whether or not this is a war on women. But when you look at health care, 2/3 of the adult women who use Medicare and Medicaid are women. 2/3 of the recipients of food stamps who are adults are women. The majority of the women use Pell Grants are women.
Congresswoman Gwen Moore, you've made your point. I'm sorry we've